Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. She ruled over an empire on which the sun never set, an empress, a symbol of power, and the matriarch of a global dynasty. Queen Victoria's name defines an era of immense change, from industrial revolutions to imperial expansion, from scientific breakthroughs to shifting social values. At the time of her death, she was the longest reigning monarch in British history, having guided her nation through much of the 19th century and leaving a legacy that shaped the modern world. But behind the statues, portraits, and stiff royal protocols, who was the real Queen Victoria? Was she the stern, reserved figure history books often portray, or was there more to her life, her struggles, and her reign? In this video, we'll uncover the fascinating story of Queen Victoria, her rise to power, her personal challenges, her love for Prince Albert, and how she became an enduring icon of her age. Victoria was born on May 24, 1819, at Kensington Palace in London, into a royal family tangled in dynastic complications. She was the daughter of Edward, Duke of Kent, the fourth son of King George III, and Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, a German princess. Her father's early death when she was just 8 months old left her to be raised by her overbearing mother and the ambitious Sir John Conroy under a rigid set of rules known as the Kensington system. This system was designed to control every aspect of Victoria's life. She was kept isolated from other children, closely monitored, and never allowed to be alone. Even her correspondence was supervised. The aim was clear: to make her dependent and pliable. But the plan backfired. Victoria grew up strong-willed, emotionally resilient, and quietly determined to claim her independence the moment she could. Her path to the throne was unexpected. As the only child of the Duke of Kent, she wasn't initially seen as a likely monarch. But fate intervened. None of her father's elder brothers had legitimate surviving heirs. One by one, they passed away or failed to produce heirs of their own. By 1830, Victoria was recognized as the heir presumptive to her uncle, King William IV. When King William IV died in June 1837, just weeks after Victoria turned 18, she ascended the throne. Her coronation on June 28, 1838, marked the beginning of a new era, not just politically, but culturally. Young, unmarried, and just out of the grip of the Kensington system, Victoria stepped into the spotlight with the eyes of an empire upon her. Little did the world know, this teenage queen would go on to become one of the most influential and enduring monarchs in British history. Queen Victoria's marriage to Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha was not just a royal union, it was one of the great love stories of European history. They were first cousins, introduced through family ties, but their bond quickly grew beyond mere duty. Victoria was immediately taken with Albert's intelligence, seriousness, and moral character. In a rare reversal of tradition, it was Victoria who proposed to Albert because, as queen, it had to be her decision. They were married on February 10, 1840, and their relationship blossomed into a true partnership. Victoria adored Albert, describing him as her angel and perfect husband. Their marriage was filled with affection, mutual respect, and an intense intellectual connection. Victoria leaned on him not only emotionally but politically as well, something that sparked controversy early on, as many Britons were uneasy about a foreign-born prince exerting influence over the Queen. But Albert earned his place. He became Victoria's closest advisor, often helping shape domestic policy and modernizing the monarchy's role. He was progressive and reform-minded, promoting science, education, and public welfare. His influence extended beyond court life. Was instrumental in organizing the Great Exhibition of 1851, held in the spectacular Crystal Palace in London. The event showcased Britain's industrial and technological prowess, drawing millions of visitors and cementing the United Kingdom's status as a global leader. The Great Exhibition symbolized Victoria and Albert's shared vision of progress, culture, and innovation. Together, they redefined what it meant to be a modern royal couple, engaged with the public, invested in the future, and deeply connected in private. Their union was a cornerstone of the Victorian era, blending romance and responsibility in a way few royal marriages ever had. In December 1861, Queen Victoria's world shattered. Prince Albert, her beloved husband and closest confidant, died suddenly of typhoid fever at just 42 years old. His death plunged Victoria into a deep and prolonged grief, from which she never fully recovered. Devastated, she withdrew almost entirely from public life. She wore black for the rest of her life, referred to Albert as "my dear angel," and surrounded herself with reminders of him. His clothes laid out, his rooms left untouched. Victoria's intense mourning became legendary, but it also sparked widespread criticism. As Britain moved through a period of rapid change and growing political challenges, its queen remained largely invisible. Many questioned her fitness to rule, and the press and public began to speak openly of the widow of Windsor as a recluse. Her seclusion created a political vacuum, and Republican sentiment began to stir for the first time in a serious way. During her reign. Yet despite the criticism, Victoria never wavered in her devotion to Albert's memory. Her mourning, though deeply personal, transformed into a public example of Victorian ideals, stoicism, loyalty, and emotional restraint. It would take many years, and the urging of her children and ministers before Victoria began to re-emerge into public life and reassert her presence as the face of the British monarchy. The Victorian Era, named for Queen Victoria herself, was one of the most transformative periods in British history. Spanning over 6 decades, it witnessed the rise of industrial might, the expansion of a global empire, and dramatic shifts in social, political, and cultural life. At the heart of it all was the Industrial Revolution, which completely reshaped Britain's economy and society. Steam power, factories, and railroads revolutionized transportation and production. Cities grew rapidly, technology advanced at an astonishing pace, and new inventions, from the telegraph to photography, changed how people lived, worked, and connected. With these advancements came both opportunity and hardship. While wealth increased for many, factory workers often endured poor conditions, and the gap between rich and poor was stark. Simultaneously, the British Empire expanded aggressively. Under Victoria's reign, it grew to become the largest empire in history, encompassing territories in Africa, Asia, the Caribbean, and the Pacific. The jewel in the crown was India, where Victoria was declared empress in 1876. Imperial pride was a defining feature of the era, often coupled with a sense of cultural superiority and a mission to civilize colonized peoples, views that are now heavily criticized but were widely accepted at the time. Back home, political life was evolving too. A series of reform acts gradually expanded voting rights and shifted power from the aristocracy to the rising middle class. The growth of newspapers, public education, and political activism fostered greater civic awareness. Victoria, though not directly involved in policymaking, symbolized stability in a time of great change. Culturally, the Victorian era left an unmistakable mark. Victoria herself became a model of modesty, domesticity, and moral propriety, qualities that shaped gender roles and societal expectations for generations. Women's roles were largely confined to the private sphere, though the seeds of feminism were being quietly planted. In fashion, too, Victoria influenced trends, from black mourning attire to tightly corseted silhouettes that defined the era's style. In many ways, the Victorian era was an age of contradiction, innovation and exploitation, progress and poverty, empire and resistance. Through it all, Queen Victoria stood as a constant figure, a living symbol of an empire at its peak and a nation in transition. Queen Victoria's reign was not only defined by grand events and personal milestones, but also by her relationships with the men who led her governments. Over her long rule, she worked with 10 different prime ministers, and her personal rapport with each varied widely, shaping both her influence and the development of Britain's constitutional monarchy. Her first and perhaps most formative political relationship was with Lord Melbourne, the Whig prime minister when she ascended the throne. Melbourne acted as a mentor and father figure to the young queen, guiding her through the intricacies of statecraft. Their close bond helped solidify her confidence as a monarch, and for a time she relied heavily on his advice. Critics occasionally raised eyebrows at their closeness, but Melbourne's steady presence proved vital in Victoria's early reign. Years later, she formed a warm and affectionate relationship with Benjamin Disraeli, the charismatic Conservative Prime Minister. Disraeli courted her favor with charm and flattery, often calling her the Fairy Queen, and treating her like a true partner in governance. Victoria, in turn, admired his boldness, his imperial vision, and his ability to make her feel central to affairs of state. Under Disraeli, she was named Empress of India, an act that both appealed to her pride and reinforced her imperial role. In stark contrast stood William Gladstone, Disraeli's great liberal rival. Victoria found Gladstone pedantic and overly moralistic, once complaining that he addresses me as though I were a public meeting. While Gladstone respected the monarchy, he saw it more as a symbolic institution, whereas Victoria often wanted a more active role. Their tension underscored the changing nature of the monarchy during the 19th century, shifting from an active participant in government to a more ceremonial and constitutional role. Through these relationships, Victoria's role evolved. While she never held legislative power, her influence was felt in appointments, foreign affairs, and public sentiment. She represented continuity and national identity, even as democratic principles gained ground. By the end of her reign, the monarchy had become firmly constitutional, but Queen Victoria's ability to shape her relationships with her prime ministers left a lasting impact on the balance between crown and government. In 1876, Queen Victoria was formally proclaimed Empress of India, a title that solidified her symbolic role at the center of the British Empire. The decision, orchestrated by Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli, was more than just a ceremonial gesture. It marked Britain's imperial dominance and Victoria's transformation into a global figurehead, embodying the vast reach and ambition of British colonialism. The title Empress of India served multiple purposes. Politically, it helped strengthen the Crown's authority in India following the 1857 Indian Rebellion and the dissolution of the British East India Company. It also appealed to British and Indian sensibilities alike, presenting the Queen not just as a monarch of the British Isles, but as the supreme ruler of a diverse and expansive empire. For Disraeli, it was a way to reinforce imperial unity and bolster conservative prestige. For Victoria, it was a point of immense pride, one that elevated her stature among European monarchs. Her image was carefully crafted and widely disseminated across the empire. Portraits, coins, and public monuments depicted her as a serene yet powerful maternal figure, an empress who watched over her global subjects. In reality, Victoria never visited India, but she took a personal interest in it, reading reports, learning Urdu phrases, and even developing a close relationship with her Indian servant, Abdul Karim, later in life. Victoria's new title and her portrayal as Empress reflected the height of British imperial ideology, the belief in a civilizing mission, national superiority, and divine right. While the human cost of empire, colonial exploitation, repression, and inequality was immense, the Victorian age cloaked it in grandeur and symbolism, with Victoria at its center. By the late 19th century, Queen Victoria was more than just a sovereign, she was a global icon, recognized around the world as the face of an empire on which the sun famously never set. In her final years, Queen Victoria had become less of a political actor and more a living symbol of continuity and empire. Her physical presence diminished. She was elderly, often in mourning dress, and increasingly reliant on her household staff. But her symbolic role only grew stronger. By the late 19th century, she represented stability in a rapidly changing world, embodying Victorian ideals of duty, family, and empire. Victoria continued to fulfill ceremonial duties, but her direct influence in political affairs had waned, reflecting the full maturation of Britain's constitutional monarchy. She had reigned through immense transformations, industrialization, democratic reform, the height of imperial expansion, and had seen Britain become the dominant global power. When she died on January 22, 1901, at the age of 81, the world mourned the end of an era. Her funeral was a grand imperial affair, attended by royalty from across Europe, many of whom were her descendants. With her death, the Victorian era, marked by profound change, imperial ambition, and strict moral codes, came to a close. The crown passed to her eldest son, Edward VII, ushering in the Edwardian age. Though Victoria was gone, her legacy lived on. In the institutions she shaped, the global empire she symbolized, and the cultural values she came to represent. She had become more than a queen. She was the matriarch of an age, and her passing marked the end of one of the most influential reigns in British history. Queen Victoria's legacy is vast and deeply embedded in the cultural, political, and historical fabric of not just Britain but much of the world. Her reign, which lasted over 6 decades, helped shape the modern British monarchy and left a lasting imprint on global geography, societal values, and imperial identity. Culturally, she became the defining symbol of an era, the Victorian Age, characterized by industrial progress, imperial expansion, and strict social norms. The moral code often associated with her reign emphasized duty, respectability, family values, and public decorum. These ideals, while often rigid and repressive, shaped the social expectations and gender roles of the 19th century. As a woman on the throne, Victoria redefined femininity and power, even as she upheld traditional roles for women in broader society. She proved that a female sovereign could command respect and loyalty on a global scale. Her influence extended geographically, with cities, lakes, mountains, and institutions named in her honor. From Victoria, British Columbia in Canada, to the majestic Victoria Falls in Africa, her name became a marker of British presence around the globe. Statues and portraits of her were erected across the empire, reinforcing her status as the figurehead of British power. Politically, Victoria's reign marked a critical transition in the monarchy's role. While she started as an engaged monarch under the guidance of Prime Minister Lord Melbourne, she gradually became more symbolic as parliamentary democracy advanced. By the end of her reign, the British monarchy was no longer a direct political force, but a constitutional and ceremonial institution. This evolution set the foundation for the modern monarchy as we know it today, a unifying symbol above politics. Queen Victoria also laid the groundwork for Britain's global relationships. Her lineage connected nearly every royal house in Europe, earning her the nickname Grandmother of Europe. Her reign witnessed the peak of the British Empire, but also sowed seeds of change that would eventually challenge and unravel imperial structures. In reflecting on her legacy, Queen Victoria stands as a complex and towering figure, a symbol of empire, a matriarch of monarchy, and a ruler whose reign marked a turning point in British history. Her life shaped modern Britain's identity and institutions, leaving a legacy that is still studied, debated, and remembered today. Queen Victoria's life was one of remarkable influence, transforming not only the British monarchy but also shaping an era defined by industrial progress, imperial expansion, and cultural change. From her unexpected rise to the throne to becoming the Empress of India, she left an indelible mark on history and the world. What do you think? Was Queen Victoria's reign truly the peak of the British Empire? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. If you're interested in learning more, check out our related videos like The British Empire Explained and The Victorian Era in 10 Minutes. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to stay updated on our latest content.